my personal interest is really understanding the way that buyers buy. How do people make decisions? So whether that's the way that a home buyer is going to make a decision as we instruct to our clients, but also how you, for your listeners, the people that they are selling to, the people that they're trying to persuade, because we're all selling something. So how do decisions get made? That's what I'm really, really fascinated by. How do we make decisions?
So how do buyers make decisions? And can you share some steps with us of how we, as people that are trying to sell, get into the buyer's mind?
Yeah, right. Well, I think there's two things that you could look at right from the very beginning that kind of give us a framework or a foundation on the entire conversation. One thing is that nobody's moving to anything until they're first moving from something. And so too many salespeople make the mistake of talking about how great their solution is. This is my home, this is my brokerage, this is my service, this is my whatever it is. Isn't it great? And nobody cares how great your program or your solution is until you understand what they are going through. And so when we get into the sales process, it always has to begin by understanding what led up to this point. Every buyer has a story. Every buyer has a story. And so when we think about it, we say, why does anybody buy anything? Why do they decide to go with this company or that company? Why do they buy a home? Why do they sell a home? Well, whatever it happens to be, everybody has a story. They're all trying to do the same thing. They're all trying to improve their lives, which implies right from the very beginning that something is not wrong or not right now in their lives. And that's where we have to start. So that's the first bit of foundation. The second bit of foundation is that the decision that we will eventually make is going to be dominantly emotional. And so when the research will tell us that about 85% of the purchase decisions that we make are based on our emotional self, and supported by 15% on the logical side. We like to think that we're really logical and analytical. The reality is there's this gut that just says, want, or I like those people, or I want to work with that gal, or whatever it is. And we make the decision on our emotion, we support it on our logic. So even as we just think about those two foundations, what is the buyer coming from, or what is the decision maker coming from? And then how much of the decision is going to be emotional? That right from the very beginning blows a lot of traditional sales theory right out of the water.
And what is traditional sales theory? How is that changed?
Yeah, I'm talking about the idea that I'm going to look at it. I'm going to say, here it is, my fancy new speaker. Isn't it beautiful? It comes in 18 different colors and it'll go up to this decibel level, and it's easy and it's light and it's portable and you can. Nobody ever asked the question, do you need a speaker?
So nobody cares about the features.
Yes, nobody cares about the features until you understand what the problem is right out of the gate. And so that discovery, that investigation for what's wrong right now is going to be critical. But I'm worried that too many salespeople out there, they just want to razzle and dazzle with how great their product or solution is, and then give you the hard close before they fully understand even who you are or why you're there in the first place.
So it's really important that we hone our listening skills, or is it questioning where we can identify their pain points?
Yes, and I think that's right. And I think that begins by saying to the customer, listen, I can tell you all about how great my product is, or I can tell you all about how great the level of service that we provide, but none of that really matters until we figure out whether we've got a solution to your specific issue. So let's start there. Let me ask you some questions so I can understand. If I can help you, I'll tell you. If I can't help you, I'll tell you that too. So there's this partnership right from the very beginning that allows us to be able to ask those questions and get into the corners of the life and figure out what's wrong now, what's not working for you that has us talking in the first place. If you don't understand that, doesn't matter how good your product is.
In your book, Be Bold and Get the Sale, you talk about the sales discomforts that we all go through that hold people back from selling, and how we have to push through it. You made me think of my marathon running days. I like to compare business to marathon running.
Right.
I'm trained to push through stress and discomfort. Bringing it back to your boldness methodology that you teach, how can we identify these discomforts, and what are some of the things that we can do to conquer them, to turn the weakness into a success?
Well, if you've had experience in running marathons, which by the way, I do not, but if you do, you know that the brain wants to give out before the body wants to give out.
Absolutely.
a big part of marathon running is training the brain to push through when it wants to send a message to the body to quit. And so, you have to do that. But the key there is you can't do that while you're running the race. You have to make that decision before you run the race. And this is my interest in cognitive behavioral therapy, because if you think about cognitive behavioral therapy, what's the definition? Cognitive, thinking, behavior, acting. So I'm going to make the mental decision. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to make a decision before I begin the action. So that's true in marathon running, but it's also true in sales. Sales is an uncomfortable position. There are all kinds of things that have the potential to trip us up in our discomfort. It's a price objection. It's somebody who's not very nice to me. It's somebody who rejects my value offering. It's another provider who's discounting, or whatever it happens to be. Those are all moments of discomfort. You can't decide how you're going to react to those moments when you're already in the moments, just like a marathon runner. You have to decide up front. So when I face this discomfort, this is how I'm going to feel, and that's how I'm going to react. So when we talk about how we deal with discomforts, we can talk about the how, but the more important question is the when. When do you deal with the discomfort? If I wait until I'm in that uncomfortable moment and I haven't even thought about it up to that point, then my emotional brain is going to click in. Here's the problem. Our brain is wired to keep us alive. And so our brain has this threat sensitivity. And when we feel a discomfort, we internalize it as a threat. And then our brain says, run away, right? Get out of this. The same way as a marathon runner, you're going to look at it. Your brain's going to say, oh, do you feel that little pull in your right hamstring? That could be bad. You should probably shut it down. And it's trying to tell you a story to convince you, because it's tired, doesn't want to do this anymore. So if you haven't decided up front how you're going to deal with those situations, you're probably going to shut it down. And so my advice is, think about the entirety of the sales process and all of those issues that can trip us up. Making a cold call, getting a price objection, dealing with somebody who is not very nice, whatever it happens to be. Think about those issues that you find uncomfortable and decide in advance how you're going to both feel and act when you get to that moment.
Now, you differentiate between everyday sales discomforts and the big ones. What's the difference, and would you approach all of them the same way?
I really wouldn't. And in fact, for me, this has been really a 10-year journey. I have no doubt about it. I have had a series of what I call comfort addictions in my life. A series of things where I make the decision according to what's most comfortable, right? So, my elliptical is uncomfortable. My sofa is comfortable, right? Broccoli uncomfortable, cheeseburger comfortable. And so if I'm only making those decisions according to comfort, whether it's in my life or in my business, then I'm never going to live the life that I really, really want to live. Now, there are major discomforts that we have in our life and in our business, and that's not where I would start. I think that boldness is like a muscle. And when we want to be bold, which I define as doing the right thing despite the discomfort, it's not about doing the hard thing, it's about doing the right thing. Start with the easy ones. What is something that makes you minorly uncomfortable? Grow some confidence in conquering that, then build up to your next level of discomfort and your next level of discomfort. And pretty soon you can conquer, not just in your business life, but in your personal life, some really, really difficult things that are preventing you from living the life, both personally and professionally, that you really should be living. So yes, start small, build that boldness muscle a little bit at a time.
It's like when doing real estate deals, you build that risk muscle and you start small and you go into bigger deals.
That's absolutely right. And early, I mean, listen, I think the first contract I ever wrote was for a client on a house. It was $98,000 in a little 3-bedroom flat top in Fremont, California. And I remember I was scared to death. It's like, why are they even trusting me on this? And now we write, multiple 6-figure deals and you don't think about it. So yes, that's the idea. You really want to build up that confidence, but you want to do it purposefully. So if I can look at it and say, this is a moment that I find uncomfortable. It's not radically uncomfortable, but it's uncomfortable. I'm going to isolate that one. I'm going to decide in advance the next time I have that moment. So, for some of your listeners, just look at it this way. Practice in your personal life. When your teenage daughter rolls her eyes at you, You say
Right.
something to your teenage daughter, she rolls her eyes at you. Now, look, that's an uncomfortable, it's not radically uncomfortable, but it's uncomfortable. What are you going to do? Don't decide then, decide now. So if we build this up a little at a time, we get stronger and stronger, bolder and bolder, and that's when we live the life that we're really supposed to live.
Fantastic. Now, what about following up? I know that
Yeah.
was a skill that, I would get leads, they would tell me no, and then I'd put it aside and forget about them. What strategies do you train your students on to embrace, to improve on that?
Well, first of all, I would say that this is one of those separation opportunities from the crowd, because the statistics tell us that the overwhelming percentage of salespeople are just one and done. Here's my one presentation. If I don't get it, it's over. That's overwhelmingly, that's the way most salespeople work. And yet we know statistically that many buyers take a long, long time to make their final decision. And so what will happen here, and I think most of your listeners would agree with this, when I'm trying to sell something, a product or a service, I'm just trying not to get eliminated, right? The first thing I want to do is don't get eliminated. Well, there's two forms of elimination. Active elimination, where I look at it and say, I don't like you, I think you're overpriced, I don't like your product, whatever it is, I'm not going to do this, but we're done. That's active elimination. Passive elimination takes place when I just forget about you. And that's the unforgivable sin in sales. We cannot put ourselves in a position where I'm forgotten about. And so the idea here is that that follow-up has to be so continual that it would be difficult for your customer to forget about you. But you have to define what follow-up is in the first place. Because for too many salespeople, they think follow-up is dial the number and say, hey, I'm still here. Am I going to get a commission? Do you want to buy from me? I think that they think that the follow-up is just about take. And I think the follow-up is all about give. How do I continue to serve that client even if they haven't decided yet, or even if they're not going to buy from me yet? How do I continue to serve? How do I give them good information? How do I give them good service? How do I connect them with the right people? Whatever it is that I can serve them, just serve and serve and serve and serve. Now, that doesn't mean you can't ask, but it's a lot easier to ask if you've first given. So here's 3 ways that I can improve your life. And now I'll just ask one question. Tell me where you're at in the process. Are you thinking about moving forward? Do you know somebody else who might want to do that sort of thing? But when we think about follow-up, it's got to be a give first, a serve first mentality.
And that should be able to help balance out the tension between being pushy and persuasive. Because a lot of times people are concerned if they call 2 or 3 times, they're going to be pushy.
Yeah.
Would you
Well,
agree?
listen, if you call 2 or 3 times, you just say, so just checking in, are you ready to move forward? You are being pushy. That there's no value that you're bringing to your client. Why do they even need that call? But on the other hand, if I give and I give and I give, and then I ask, that's not pushy, that's respectful. And if a customer has to say, you know what, we've decided to go somewhere else, we thank them, we ask if there's anybody else that they know that might want to do business with them, and then that's fine. But I don't think it's pushy when you're serving. I really don't. If you've got their best interest in mind and we're continuing to serve, I don't think that's pushy at all. Let me look at it one other way. If a request for a follow-up, a request for another appointment or whatever it is, if that one request can destroy the entire relationship, it wasn't really much of a relationship in the first place. So if you did your job right up front, the follow-up should be expected. The follow-up should be welcome. It should not be a high pressure situation either for you or for your customer.
And why would a follow-up, can you give an example of how a follow-up can destroy a relationship? What do you
Well,
mean by
sure. Yeah. So if in the initial conversations, it was very transactional, we never got to that point where I was the trusted advisor. It was just like, here's my product. What do you think? There's no connection there. The customer at that point is not feeling particularly beholden on a relational level. They feel like it's a transaction. I'm a buyer, you're a salesperson, I have my job, you have your job, that's fine. Now, if I come back and say, well, do you want to buy? Now it sounds like I'm damaging what just took place, and what took place wasn't that healthy in the first place. But if I look at it another way and I say up front, that relationship is strong, there's a lot of trust there, there's a mutual purpose for what we're trying to accomplish, I've already proven that I've got your best interest in mind, that's not going to destroy the relationship because you said, would you like to move forward with this?
Of
So we
course.
do the work up front that gives us permission to be able to do the effective follow-up thereafter.
Now, let's talk about closing techniques. There's so many
Yeah.
of them. Assumptive close, the last
Yeah.
one, we're not going to have any more close. One of my coaches taught me the urgency close. What do you think about all these closes? And do you have a Jeff Shore close that you train?
I don't know. I
People
wouldn't
are-
call it a Jeff Shore close, but let's start by just talking about the theory here. First of all, I think that the hang up on closing is much more in the mind of a salesperson than it is of a customer. I think most customers understand they're talking to a salesperson in a sales environment. It's if you go out and you test drive a car and then you go back to the office and the car salesperson says, "Would you like to buy it?" Are you shocked? Are you offended? No, that's just part of the process. You'd probably be surprised if the salesperson didn't ask if you wanted to buy it.
Right.
So
You're
on the
going in to buy
consumer,
one.
of course, it says sales office right on the door. There's no mystery right here. So the hang up with sales, I am convinced, is much more in the mind of the salesperson than it is in the mind of the customer. I don't think anybody ever got hit because they asked somebody, would you like to buy, right? It's not like that. So we've got to overcome our own fear. Sometimes we do this thing called catastrophizing, where when we're afraid and we're uncomfortable, we dream up this worst case scenario of what could happen. I could destroy the entire relationship. And so you got to overcome that. You got to get past that because that's not what your customers are going through. They actually rather expect that you're going to ask for the sale. It's part and parcel to a buyer-seller relationship. So I would start right there. Second thing that we need to look at is that the ask at the end is so much easier if the buyer has already said yes to all of the key component pieces that make up the sale first. So don't put all of your weight onto that one big final close. Be thinking about all of the component parts of the sale. So for example, if I'm selling a car, I'm asking somebody, do you like the look of the car? What do you think about the exterior? And a little while later, when they get in the car so what's your first impression when you sat down? How did it feel to you? And then a little after that, how's it driving right now, right? And then, so is this the price range that you were hoping to find over here? So what am I doing? I'm asking all of these component closes that allow my customer to buy a little bit at a time. And it's so much easier to buy that way, to purchase a little bit at a time. Now, the reason that works and the reason that's so effective is because people don't argue with themselves. So it would be illogical for them to say yes to all the component pieces and then to say, no, I don't want to buy this by the time they're done. So I don't care what you're selling, start there. What are the different things that my customer is buying? It's not just a final decision. What are the key sub decisions? And then you need to ask for agreements all along the way. That's the idea. So we're trying to establish this kind of decision-making rhythm, this cadence, where the customer is agreeing, not with you, they're agreeing with themselves. They can hear themselves saying, yes, that works. Yes, I like that. That's great. Okay. Now, when it comes then to the very end, that final close probably depends on the product and more specifically on the product or service, and more specifically, how complex the product and service is. The simpler the product and service, the simpler the close, right? So if I can look at it and I'm just trying to sell a pen, I can find out your need for the pen. I can tell you about the attributes. I said, what do you think? Does it sound good? Would you like it? And that's a very simple close for a very simple product. But if I've got something that's more complicated, a system, a service, a software solution, a home, a car, whatever it is, then I prefer and happens to be my personal favorite close, but it's called the explain the process close, where I explain the way that the purchase process works first, and then I ask them whether they want to take the first step. So again, going back to let's just use a new home as an example.
Okay.
I've worked with a customer, we're at that point, and I can say to the customer, if you decide to purchase, let me just walk you through the steps. The first thing we're going to do is sit down and write a purchase agreement. Then there's a $5,000 deposit. That's part of your down payment. Then we're going to make an appointment for your lender. And I'm going to go through in about 90 seconds and explain all the steps. Then I'm going to say to that customer, so that's the way the process works. Now, the very first step is to sit down and write a purchase agreement. Is that where we're at? Is that what you wanted to do? The question isn't scary. It's not manipulative. It's not in your face. It's just, I just explained the steps. The first step is to write a purchase agreement. Is that where you're at? Is that what you wanted to do? There's
Yes,
only two possible answers. It's either
yes
yes
or
or
no.
no, right?
Yeah.
And if it's yes, let's move forward. And if it's no, okay, well, where are you at? Tell me what you're thinking right now. But I love that close because it's non-confrontational. There's nothing scary about it. The idea that the close means I got to look at somebody and say, "What's it going to take to get you into this home today?" I mean, that's a whole. I don't have any interest in that type of selling.
Do people even sell like that anymore?
They do. They absolutely do. The
I
high
haven't
pressure
run
sale
into that
is
in a
still
long
out there.
time.
No, I agree. No, you're right. It's dramatically diminished. There's no question about it. But there are still prominent sales trainers that teach those sort of manipulative techniques to look at it and say, I think I can trick you into buying here. And I do not ascribe to anything of the sort.
Right, right. And how about objections? Should they all be handled the same way? Do you have a couple
Well,
of strategies you can share with us?
interesting, because when you said, should they all be handled the same way? My guess is that your audience probably looked at it and said, well, of course not. They're all different objections. They should be all handled differently. And I think you are absolutely right that they should all be handled the same way. And let me tell you why. There should be an auto response to every single objection. I don't care what it is. And the auto response is, tell me more about that. Talk to me. Tell me more. Tell me why you're asking. What is the specific nature of what you're? The reason I'm saying this is that you need to know two things. You need to know the specifics of the objection, and you need to know the severity of the objection. Because sometimes people will bring stuff up and it's really not that big of a deal. Or they'll bring something up and it's not an objection at all. It's just a misunderstanding. So there absolutely should be an auto response that says, tell me more about that. That is always where I want to begin. I can't know how to answer the objection until I fully understand the objection. And my concern here is that too many salespeople hear the first of the objection, and in their mind, they lock into what they're going to say before they fully understood what the customer is dealing with. So this is my go-to response for every rejection. Tell me more, talk to me. Once I get that sense, now I've got a whole list of ways that I can go through and take care of those objections.
Right. They're not canned responses. So many people have
No.
canned responses to the objections.
Yeah. But if you look at it this way, if I see myself as a partner with this customer, that we're establishing a mutual purpose, this is not an objection. I'm not trying to win a war here, right? The objection looks like this. It's like, if it would almost be like an oncologist talking to a cancer patient and saying, this is what we're going to do to try and beat this thing. We want to look at it the same way. I'm not trying to fight and get into a fight that I want to win with my customer. No, it's like, you have an issue. Let me partner with you to the other side of that so you can be comfortable moving forward. That's the mentality that we want to take.
Now, what are some of the things that salespeople may be doing out of awareness that can kill a sale?
Where some of the subconscious things that they're doing, is that what you're going after here?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing here is that people gravitate towards confidence. They follow confidence. You think about the political leaders or the captain of the sports team or celebrities or whatever it is. People gravitate towards confidence. And so a sales professional who does not exude confidence is in trouble, because the customer is going to adopt the level of confidence that the customer has. It's like if I go to a doctor and we find out what's wrong, and the doctor says, don't worry about this. I do this all the time. The success rate is nearly 100%. You're going to be fine. Versus the doctor who says, boy, this is a tough one. Never seen it before, but let me Google it and I'll see if I can come up with some answers. Right? Which doctor would you rather see? So
I
I think
would
that's
walk
one.
out of there really fast.
In a hurry, right? So I think that's one. The other one is the presence of what we call emotional altitude. So emotional altitude measures the amount of positive emotional experience that a customer is having as they're going through that buying process. When I say emotional, I don't mean sappy or syrupy. I only mean how much of their brain is tied to their gut versus their head. Now, this is important because if a salesperson is talking in ways that are completely analytical and logical, then they're connecting with the customer's head, but they're not connecting with the customer's heart. So if you think about the way that you go on a test drive as a customer, you're stone faced. You're looking at, you're not showing your salesperson anything. Why? Well, some might say that, well, I don't want to tip my hand and show them how interested in it. But usually I would argue that the reason that we are so stoic and stone faced is because that's what we see from the salesperson. So if the salesperson doesn't give us permission to be evocative and emotive and to talk about how much we like something, if it's very difficult to buy in that environment. So I would say that it's up to the salesperson to set the emotional pace, that this should be upbeat and energetic. I don't mean it has to be, in your face and peppy, but it has to be very positive. Right? This should be a very positive experience. And it's up to the salesperson to drive that positive energy, that emotional altitude. Oftentimes in the sales process, the emotional altitude tends to wane. It's up to the salesperson to support that, to bring it back up. Because ultimately people buy in times of high positive energy. When their emotional level is, that positive emotion is strong, that's when they buy. So the salesperson who doesn't get that is going to get stuck into this logical, analytical land where it's very, very difficult to make a purchase decision.
Right. Now, the last couple of years has been really tumultuous.
Yeah.
Everybody's on Zoom, more online sales. That's just the way it is now.
It is.
How has the landscape changed, and what tweaks can salespeople do to adapt to these changes?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, people are spending so much more time online than
Yeah.
they ever have before. And so the amount of time that they're spending online, I had a podcast up until the beginning of the pandemic, and I just shut it down because it was designed for people to listen to while they were driving. Well, guess what? People stopped commuting. So I put all my efforts into our YouTube channel because that's what people were doing, right?
Right, I
So
see
now what
that.
you
You have
have,
so many videos.
totally, yeah, we put
Yeah.
out every single week, we got new material out there. But when I look at buyers now, they are camping out online. Now, that's both good and bad. On the one hand, they are highly informed before they talk to you. On the other hand, they are absolutely into information overload. And that leads to something called decision fatigue. Because as I'm searching one website after another to find these solutions, I'm having to make all these little mini decisions along the way. Do I like this person? Is that a good solution? It is in my price range. And after a while, that decision fatigue sets in and it becomes very, very difficult. So when I look at that, I look at the opportunity for a salesperson then to circumvent all of the details and to reconnect to the emotion. Because a website doesn't tend to ask you, tell me about the situation you're in right now. How do you feel about that? Who else is affected? Is that difficult for you? It's difficult for a website to ask those questions. So that's where the salesperson's primary job now is not to pile on even more information that would lead to more decision fatigue. Their
Sure.
primary job is to do things that the internet cannot do. And primarily that means getting to know the customer so well that they can customize a solution for them. So that's really where it begins. It's to say to a customer, even if it's on a virtual Zoom meeting, to be able to say to a customer, look, I don't want to waste your time and show you a bunch of stuff that you don't want. So I'm going to ask you a few questions just so I can understand your background and what's not working for you now. If I've got something that I can help you with, we'll talk. If I can't, I'll tell you and we'll save your time. Fair enough? And now that gives me permission to be able to ask about their life. What's going on now? What is your issue? And how is that affecting your world?
Wonderful. Is there any, that was my last question. Do you have anything you want to share with my audience that I may have not asked you that might be helpful?
If you are a sales professional, then the natural reaction for salespeople is to say, I don't want to role play. And I get that, and I understand that. I've been in the training business for a long time. But I got to ask you the question, if you don't want to practice, then when are you going to get better? Because if we think that we can get better by practicing in front of our customers, it's not the way it works. I want to just make a suggestion. Learn a technique that'll take you all of 15 seconds once it's all ready, once it's complete, to have it mastered. And then take that technique and work on it and do it over and over again out loud while you're driving, whatever it is. And then move on to another 15-second technique I know, no, I get it. Practice is uncomfortable. That's what we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
But you cannot allow your comfort addiction to prevent you from being the best you can be. Let your comfort, that moment of discomfort, let that be a clue that there's an improvement in front of you. Let that be a clue that there's an opportunity for you to get better. So don't think about trying to master the entirety of your presentation. Just take 15 seconds and master that through repetition. Then add something else, then add something else. But you don't get better by showing up every day. You don't get better by reading a book. You don't even get better by going to a really good training program. You get better through repetition. You
Taking
got to
action.
lean into that discomfort.
Taking action. That's supposed to
Absolutely.
do it.
100%.
Wonderful. Jeff, what an insightful, educational few minutes that we had together. I'm sure our listeners appreciated everything. Lots of value there. Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed
Really
having
my
you on the
pleasure.
show.
Thanks for having me. That was a fun conversation.